chapter 4, beginning at verse 12. Now, when Jesus heard that John had been arrested, he withdrew to Galilee. He left Nazareth and made his home in Capernaum by the sea, in the territory of Zebulun and Naphtali, so that what had been spoken through the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. Land of Zebulun, land of Naphtali, on the road by the sea, across the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, the people who sat in darkness have seen a great light, and for those who sat in the region and shadow of death, light has dawned. From that time, Jesus began to proclaim, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near." As he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who was called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." Immediately they left their nets and followed him. As he went from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, in the boat with their father Zebedee, mending their nets. And he called them. Immediately they left the boat and father and followed him. Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and curing every disease and every sickness among the people. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to
God. I've heard there's pretty good fishing in these parts. Now, I've had a little experience in surf fishing, but it's different here. In surf fishing, I have my rod and my reel. I use bait or lure to attract the fish, and I have my net to land a catch. But what do we have in these parts? How do you equip a church to fish for people? You see, hooks, lures, and nets all imply trickery and coercion, and yet I have no interest in such tactics. In truth, the church is not called to trap people like fish. Instead, we are called to free them. Fear and anxiety, guilt and grudges are the hooks that hold us back. Temptations are the lures that deceive us with promises that are quite literally too good to be true. Self-righteousness and hypocrisy, apathy and ignorance are the nets that trap us and bring us down. These are examples of what imprisons us in this world. So where do we begin to free people? Well, you may have noticed that every one of the examples of hooks, lures, and nets that I mentioned are found in the church. In other words, we begin right here. The support we give one another through thick and thin and the gospel of grace that we teach and preach help remove the barbs of fear and anxiety. The forgiveness we practice on one another can release us from the guilt and the grudges that hold us back. The truth we speak in love can unmask the lure of temptation that might otherwise deceive us. And humble service and discipleship can loosen the grip of self-righteousness and hypocrisy, while compassion frees us to care about others and to address injustice. Freedom, my friend. Not freedom to do what we want, but freedom from the hooks, lures, and nets that so easily entrap us. This is what we practice in the life of the church, and this is what the church has to offer the world: the opportunity to loosen the bonds that enslave us and live free. So we have what I believe is this wonderful community called the church to share with the world, a world that is right outside these doors. We have even recently made strides in improving our accessibility with a new ramp and a new sign. It's like living in a house by a lake. with right outside your window. It's all right here. All we have to do is a little creative fishing. But how? Well, I enjoy listening to TED Talks. You familiar with those? TED stands for Technology, Entertainment, Design, and is a yearly conference that invites innovative people from all over the world to share their work and their ideas. Well, in a recent TED Talk, Jeanette Sadat Khan, the Transportation Commissioner of New York City, gave a talk basically on her task to reinvent the streets of New York City. She pointed out that streets are one of the most valuable resources that a city has, but they are mostly hidden in plain sight. Her mantra was, and I quote, "Do bold experiments that are cheap to try out," unquote. In other words, it's time to go fishing. She went on to account the success her department had in reinvigorating the city by simple yet profound changes to the streetscape. At first, her talk simply led me to think that our city of West Jefferson is on to something in recent improvements that have been made to our own streetscape. Then it occurred to me that we have done the same thing with a new ramp and a new sign. We have made simple but profound changes that affect the presentation of our church to the community. We are open, we are welcome, we are accessible. And then something else dawned on me. Now, in her TED Talk, Jeanette Sadat Khan gave an account of one inexpensive experiment they tried. They had planned to temporarily close a street around Times Square and put seating on the street in order to create spontaneous gathering areas for people. Now, this was a real experiment. They were not creating traffic problems in Fort Lee. This was the real experiment. And if it worked, great. If not, they would simply reopen the street. No harm, no foul. But unfortunately, the furniture had not arrived by the time they closed the street. So they ran to the hardware stores in the area and they bought all the lawn chairs and they spread them around the area. As it turned out, the lawn chairs were the talk of the town. No one complained that they had closed a street around Times Square. All they did was talk about the lawn chairs. What do you think of the lawn chairs? What about the color of the lawn chairs? Jeanette went on to say that if you're facing a big, potentially controversial project, think lawn chairs. Friends, I'm thinking lawn chairs. You see, in addition, well, maybe back up. Jeanette said that the experiment was a huge success. People materialized out of nowhere like the crew of the Enterprise in Star Trek. They just sort of beamed down, They went fishing for people without hooks, without lures, and without nets. All they did was create space, a place where people could gather, put a few lawn chairs around, and the people came. Businesses increased around Times Square, and several new flagship stores opened in that period. Lawn chairs. I am thinking lawn chairs. You see, in addition to our two greatest assets, the gospel and our church family, we have this amazing location and facility. And our facility, like the streets to New York City, is one of our greatest assets, yet it remains hidden in plain sight. So why can't we learn from Jeanette Sadat Khan? Why can't we do bold experiments that are cheap to try out? In other words, why can't we go fishing? Here's what I want you to do. If you are able, go out by the double doors, by the steps after you leave worship this morning. Well, go to reception first, go to our fellowship hour. But then, if you can, exit down those steps. And then look, as you go down the steps, look to your left. And look at that long porch we have that parallels the street. Look down that space that we already have right here on the main street in the town and think lawn chairs. I'm not kidding. Then I want you to go home. I want you to look in that garage or maybe down in that basement and find that old lawn chair or maybe that old table that's been sitting down there collecting dust. Clean it up and hang on to it. Do not bring it here. Do not. We don't need a junk pile out there. Do not bring it here. But hang on to it. Hang on to it, because fishing season is coming, and I want to be ready. I want to be ready to do bold experiments that are cheap to try out. I want us to go fishing for people. Again, when Jesus called his new disciples to follow him and fish for people, he wasn't calling them to entrap people. He was calling them to take the initiative. That's what it means to fish for people, to seek them out. Rather than simply unlocking our door at our church on Sunday mornings, we can go out to where they are. We already have the space spread out before us, our own front porch to the world. All we need is a few lawn chairs and a plan. You have the lawn chairs, I know you do. And I've got a plan, or at least an idea for an experiment. If the session approves this idea and it works, great. If not, we can clean up and try something else. So here's what I have in mind. I would like to set up my study, my office, on the porch during the mornings this summer. And you bring the chairs, a few tables, and we'll set up some meeting places on the porch as well. Maybe you can come by some mornings for a visit, maybe, meet a few people. Bring a banjo, guitar, we might do a little picking. We'll take the church outside this building and do a little fishing. No barbs, no hooks, no nets. We don't want to entrap people. Instead, we want to give people a reason to come inside this facility, to enter our building. We want to take the initiative to meet people where they are and let them know who we are. A hospitable church who cares. I've heard there's pretty good fishing in these parts. This summer, I'd like to find out for myself. In the meantime, think lawn chairs. I'm telling you, think lawn chairs. Let all God's people say.